All right.
Cool.
Camera, action.
Right, I'm a Dablam. Did the trip in October, November 2018. It was a trip of two halves, so we had our acclimatisation was done by walking up to the Everest base camp, and there was about 15 of us in total for the for that particular part of it. There were some people that were just doing Everest base camp. Then there was a group of us that were going on to do Dablam, and there was also some people that were going to go and do Island Peak. So so off we went. Obviously, the first step is to get up to Lukla. The planes have changed quite a bit since the last time I'd been out there. And now they've actually got the gangway going down the middle, and you don't sit on bench seats anymore. It's still hair-raising going up into Lukla though. It gets worse every time that I do it, because it's just, I know what's coming. But anyway, we managed to get in there without crashing, so that was all good. We then walked up to, the first thing is to get all your luggage, and then you stay in Lukla for the night, and then you walk to a place called Phakding, and you stay there for a night, and then you come up to Namche Bazaar, which is the sort of main town in that sort of area. And it's changed a lot yet again since I was last there. I was there in 2007. I was there in 2009, and I was there in 2013. So obviously the earthquake was in 2015, and the whole area got pretty decimated in that. And they've rebuilt quite a lot of stuff. It's not as big as it used to be, but they're still working on things at the moment. They have built some memorials. They've built a big stupa. They've built a big water feature and such like as well. So when you actually come into Namche Bazaar, it's an absolute bloody drag up an enormous hill to get in there. And it used to be a real shonky track that you came in, and you'd pass the market where the Tibetans would be holding their markets on a Tuesday and Friday or whatever. But that's all gone now, and they've built these things in place. So we stayed there for a couple of nights. Obviously, you try and acclimatise as best you can, and sort of go out for a little walk here and there. So some of the activities that we did was we went out, we spun some prayer wheels, because obviously that always helps. We visited, they've built a whole new section to the Everest first ascent. And the picture down at the bottom left of Sherpa Tenzing, it's actually, you can't really see his face, but it's quite a frightening statue. And the thing that we all loved was the fact that the sign that they've got on it says "Do not climb." So everybody was getting their pictures on that. The picture in the middle, that was a weird one, because this was up in the same area, and it was a group of Russians who had either just got married, or they were just about to get married, or something like that, and basically they'd helicoptered up there to get these photographs taken. And quite why he's dressed in the way that he is, I'm not 100% sure, but we had in our group of 15, we had 4 either serving or former Marines in the group. And there was a father and 2 sons, and then the father's best friend. And the chap who was the father's best friend, Colin, he was a bit of a wag, really. Big chap, very lively, shall we say. And he actually went up to them and took the place of the man, and got a photograph taken with the girl, and Colin was there with top off, with the bow tie, and yeah, he got a photograph of him with this rather stunning looking Russian woman. So we had a mooch around. You can see in the top right as well that almost no matter where you go, you can still see Dablam just peeking in the background. And of course, sort of, since that was the prime aim of me going out there, that was what my attention was sort of focused on right throughout. And I went with my friend Cam that I did Troyu with, and Rolf was the guide again. And I said to Rolf, I'm really, quite concerned because, sort of just wondering whether it's a bit out of my comfort, it certainly is out of my comfort zone, but whether I'll manage it. And he's like, don't, just put it out of your mind, just don't worry about it. And it's really hard to do that when everywhere you look, you see that bloody mountain. So, but we did spend quite a bit of time in Daphne's bar in Namche as well, and sort of with the odd tequila shot just to keep us going as well. So, yeah, well, that's it. Well, it helps with the acclimatization, apparently.
I believe you.
So the base trail itself, again, it's changed quite a bit. It was, although it doesn't look it there, it was actually really, really busy because that's the height of the trekking season. And there was lots and lots of big groups. And we were staying in lodges all the way up. We weren't camping for this part of it. And the lodges themselves as well were absolutely stowed out. But the scenery as you're walking up is absolutely stunning. Yet again, you can see Ama Dablam in the distance. And it's just everywhere, and the weather was lovely, and it was so nice. I'd done quite a bit of research on Ama Dablam before committing myself to it, and it's particularly for the climbing part of it, because the main things that I was worried about was that I wouldn't actually be up to the climbing, that it would be just a bit beyond me, because obviously being at altitude as well. But it's the hardest bit of it is VS. And I knew that I could second VS, not very elegantly, but I can do that. And I looked and I saw what the yellow tower consisted of. I looked and saw what the grey tower consisted of, and they're the two major climbing bits. And the other thing that worried me was the exposure as well, because I'm not actually that great with heights, and I was a bit concerned that it might just be a little bit much. But anyway, and I said to Rolf, that's the things that I'm worried about. And anyways, we're chatting, the subject of mushrooms come up, as in, not the type that you eat. And he said, oh, well, sort of just before you get to Camp 3, you have to cross the mushrooms. And mushrooms? What mushrooms? He said, oh, well, snow and ice mushrooms, and there's maybe a couple of feet width, and you've got sort of maybe sort of 1,000-meter drop off either side, and there is a fixed rope, but it's quite slack because you can't fix it in the middle, and if you fall off at that point, then you go down quite a way, and you've got to get yourself back up, and I'm like, I don't think I can do this. I said, I'll need to go across on my hands and knees. And he said, oh, well, whatever, and that was it. So all I could think of the whole time then was these bloody mushrooms, because I didn't know what on earth to expect. So we trundled on up. We went up let's go back up. Yeah, so I couldn't see. Yeah, I put the route on the right-hand side. Unfortunately, everybody's pictures are all on there at the moment, so I can't really see. But you head up basically the sort of a set route. So we got up to Dingbushay, and we spent a couple of days there again. And the others, they went out to have a walk up a hill at the back. And Cam and I, we decided that actually we just fancied just lying in the sun lounger and instead. And getting a shower and just, sort of chilling out a bit as well. So we rested there for a couple of days. Yet again, we found the local hostelry as well, and sort of kept the economy of the village going with Everest beer. So then, from Dingbushay, you head up, and on the way to Lobishay, you pass the memorials at Douglas, and there are a lot more there than there were the first time that I was there. This is basically, where you'll see the memorials to the likes of Scott Fisher and co, the people who have perished on Everest. And it's not just Everest now, the memorials. So you've got memorials to the people who were murdered at Nanga Parbat base camp some years ago. I didn't see it, but there's also a memorial to our climbing Sherpa Tundu, who was on Cho-Oyu with us, who got killed in Ama Dablam 6 weeks after our Cho-Oyu trip finished. And I think it's just behind Scott Fisher's memorial. But there's so many memorials now. It covers both sides of the track, and yeah, it's quite moving to go around and read them all, because obviously they were, you know, people who just wanted to climb a mountain and unfortunately didn't quite make it back.
Brings the risk back to you, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, especially when you're now worried about these bloody mushrooms as well. You'll get across them.
Sorry.
So I haven't got any pictures of Lobuche because when I was there years ago, it was a shithole, and it still is. It's a little bit better than it was, but yeah, there's nothing really to take pictures of. But the place after that is Gorak Shep, and this is where in 2007 I did the Everest Marathon, and this is where we started from. And in the right-hand picture, you can see what looks like a, you know, dusty old football field, and that's where we actually started. And we ran all the way back down to Namche Bazaar, which was 20 miles, and then we ran a 6-mile loop out to Tamil and back to bring it up to the full marathon. And so it was interesting just to see how much things had changed since then. So we spent the night at Gorak Shep, and then the following day we went up to Everest Base Camp. So you come across the sort of the signpost for Everest Base Camp, and it's still quite a distance before you actually get to the base camp itself. Obviously there was nobody really there. There's no, you know, sort of camp or anything like that, because this was, you know, October, November time, and obviously the Everest season is spring, or, you know, sort of sometimes a bit of autumn. But yeah, it was really good actually. The Khumbu Icefall was really, really impressive. I cannot imagine having to pick my way through that, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I've got no urge to do Everest anyway. It's not on my radar at all. It's just something I've never fancied, but the Icefall was superb. Some of the others went down into the Icefall to have a look round, and but I just waited up at the base camp because we had one of the girls was struggling a little bit, so she was quite a bit behind, so I waited for her to get up to the base camp, and at least there was somebody there to greet her. So so that was the first time that I'd been to the base camp, and it is a lovely trek for those that want to do it. So after that, we headed back down to Dingboche, and then we all took our various leaves. So there was two went off to Island Peak. There was supposed to be 4 going, but the one person out of the couple had got altitude sickness and had to go back down, so her husband went with her. So there's 2 went to Island Peak. The remainder, there's 4 of us went to, well, 5 of us including Rolf, went to Ama Dablam. So there was 2 Swedes, Matthias and Stefan, and my friend Cam and I and Rolf. We all headed off to Ama Dablam, and the rest of them all, that was the end of their trip. They were all heading back home again. So so this was now the sort of the main part. I mean, the base trail trek was really nice, but I felt that all the time that I was doing that, I was just wanting to get over to Ama Dablam to start preparing for that, really.
How many days were you on that trip then?
That was 10 days to get up to base camp. So it was actually quite quick. It was a little bit quick for my liking, because when I did the Everest Marathon, we trekked for quite a while. We took 16 days to get up to Gorak Shep. So it was a little bit fast for my acclimatization, and I don't think the tequila really helped in some respects. But so I think if I was doing it again, I would probably go out for a little bit longer, take a little bit more time to acclimatize before then going on to the sort of main thing.
So is going to Everest Base Camp sort of standard part of the acclimatization then?
A lot of people do it. Some people do other things as well. And this is what I would do if I was going to, well, I'd like to go back and have a bash and actually try and get to the summit this time. Spoiled it for the rest now.
Oh.
But No, if I was doing it again, I would. I'd probably go and try and acclimatise in another 6,000 metre peak. So I'd like to go and perhaps do Island Peak or Le Boucher East instead. So you're still going up the base trail for a bit of it, but you then get off the sort of main thoroughfare because it really was so busy. And as I said, there was such big groups, and you're constantly either you've got really fit people that are trying to push past you, or you've got right slow coaches who are usually British actually, right slow coaches you're trying to get past, and people seem to lose their good manners sometimes in passing folk. So yeah, I'd prefer to acclimatise on something else.
The Bocce East is actually quite tricky. Bob and I failed to get up it.
Sorry, say that again, Norman?
The Bocce East is actually quite tricky.
Yeah.
There's a long traverse, then you have to drop down and on up.
Right.
We had it as an objective.
Oh, okay, yeah.
To get up
Yeah.
it. That was in 2009.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I must admit, I'm not, I mean, I know a few people who have done it, but because it's one of these ones that's classed yet again as a trekking peak.
It's considered to be about the hardest that is a trekking peak.
Yeah.
In terms of getting the acclimatisation, it's probably a better bet.
Yeah. Well, Island Peak as well, obviously is classed as a trekking peak, but because of the global warming, it's ridgeline now. It's not got the snowy ridge, and they've actually got to go almost directly up it now. So that's got a lot harder as well, apparently, over the years. Because I had a bash at that in 2013, but we got turned back by the weather. So I've not been up Island Peak yet. But anyway, so we got to the Ama Dablam base camp, and that was really lovely. We had a river running nearby. The tents were nice and comfortable. The ground was all flat, and it was just absolutely lovely. And you'd see the clouds would roll in, the clouds would roll out, and it was just a really pleasant place to be. There were quite a lot of tents there, but the season for Ama Dablam it seems to be relatively long, because there weren't too many people had been up before we got there. But at the likes of Jagged Globe, they actually go middle of December, pretty much is when they're in Ama Dablam, whereas we were leaving in the middle of November. So they're looking at early December summits they're looking at, where it's a lot colder, a lot more stable though. And there's not so many people, so that group hadn't, those groups hadn't actually turned up yet. So it's sort of spread a little bit more evenly, I think, across the climbing season on there. So this was just above our toilet tent, and this is obviously Ama Dablam there, but this is the view that we had around ourselves. See if it works.
Oh, good.
And it's just absolutely stunning. It really is. I cannot tell you what mountains were there, to be perfectly honest. I'm not so good at the mountain recognition. I should mention the toilet tent actually, because what they do is they put a barrel in the ground, and the toilet tent goes round it, and then everything that goes into the barrel they pack out. That was the trickiest bit of the whole thing, because they'd put the barrel in, there was gaps round the barrel, they got the wobbliest stones they possibly could for you to sort of stand on, and honestly every time I went there I thought, this is a disaster just waiting to happen. Either my foot's going to go down between the stones and down the outside of the barrel, or my foot's going to go into the barrel, or I'm just going to end up having to call for help or something. So yeah, it wasn't the best toilet tent in the world. So we spent a couple of days at base camp, and then it was time for the first rotation up to Camp 1, and you basically go up the ridgeline, and it's quite a trek up to Camp 1. There's nothing difficult about it. It's just on the track, basically, up until you get to, there's a boulder field, and then you've got the slabs. And the first day that we went up, we didn't quite get to Camp 1. We dumped stuff off just before there, and then went back down to base camp for a day's rest. There'd been a bit of illness. The 2 Swedish guys weren't very well. One was particularly bad, so they were getting packed up with antibiotics and such like at the time. So we stowed our stuff just below Camp 1, and then had a day's rest.
What was it?
Say again?
What was it that they were being affected by?
Oh, it was just a lung infection.
Right.
So it was just, from where I really don't know, but so we rested a day, then we went back up and we actually went to Camp 1 this time, and so it's not too bad. I've been in worse places, and the only downside of it, and it didn't affect us as the clients, but the Sherpas have got to carry water up there because there's no natural source. There's no snow up there to melt, and there's no water, sort of sources or anything like that. So they had to go up there with, sort of 25 kilogram containers on their backs to supply the camp. So we didn't want to be staying up there for too long. So we basically had a night up there and then back down to base camp again. The boulder field, I'm not usually the best in boulder fields, but this was fine. There were bloody big boulders, I have to say. And then when you got onto the slabs, that's actually where the fixed ropes start. It's very low down, relatively speaking. And quite honestly, you don't need the fixed ropes to go up the slabs because they're plenty grippy and everything, and they're not that steep. But that's where they start from anyway. So after going back down, then obviously it was time to look at doing summit bid. So we came back up to Camp 1, and then the next thing is to go to Camp 2. And this is where the crux of the route is. It's the Yellow Tower. And again, you get beautiful views and such like. The Yellow Tower, it's not that difficult climbing. As I said, it's about VS or thereabouts. And it's all, yet again, on fixed rope. And what the problem that I found was, because I made a right meal of it, I really did. What they did was, because we were carrying quite a bit of kit on our backs, they decided that one guy would go up ahead and then drop a line down and clip it onto the back of the rucksack just to take the weight off. And that just really didn't, for me, it didn't work at all, because all that happened was that the line actually just came right up the back of my helmet, and then I couldn't move my head left, right, up or down or anything like that. And so that the Yellow Tower I just found really, really tricky.
Did they have hauled the sacks?
So again?
Did they have hauled the sacks?
Not really, because there's too many bits that it could get caught on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we didn't, because that would have been good if we could have, but yeah, I think they were just to get caught up with the straps.
Yeah. You could hold the sack alongside you, couldn't you?
Yeah. I mean, if I was doing it again, then I would just say don't bother dropping a line, because that it just curtailed me so much. The other thing is as well that, I mean, fixed lines are obviously great because you're as safe as you possibly can be, but you're then restricted to someone else's line up a route. And I kept looking, thinking, if I could just go 6 feet to the left, that would be easier climbing for me. And because I find that I'm not the best climber by any stretch at all. But sometimes I find that some things are a bit easier for me than other climbs. And and you're so constrained to following that line, it can make it more difficult than it would need to be. So, but anyway, at the top,
what was the length of the difficult bit, the pitch or whatever?
It's not that high. I can't remember how high it is. It's about, I don't know, what does it look like in that picture? Because basically that's it. That's it. I think it's about 30. Is it about 30 or 50 meters or something like that?
Yeah.
So it's not, it's not excessively long, thankfully.
Would it be simpler to top rope it or what?
Yeah, I mean, It would be. I mean, there's plenty of people that just climb it, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, it's I don't think it's not that difficult. But you are doing it at altitude for one thing, because you're coming up to 6,000 meters at that point. So everything is
pretty BS carrying a heavy rucksack in big boots at altitude.
Yeah. Yeah, and to save
That's delightful.
yeah. Well, the other thing,
I'm sure when I've read up about Dablam, they say HVS, so I think it's probably actually harder than what.
Yeah, and it might be. It felt harder to me, but but as I said, I'm a pretty rubbish climber, so.
In big boots with a rucksack at altitude.
Yeah,
it's not going to be easy at all.
No, well that's it. And I was wearing my La Sportiva Spantics, so my 7,000 meter boots. So yeah, you can't really smear that well on those, I must admit. But you've probably all seen a picture similar to this before, but this is Camp 2.
Oh, lovely.
Oh
my God.
Brilliant.
Right.
I didn't take that picture, I have to say, but that's that's
toilet tent.
well. No, yeah, I'll tell you, that was talk about taking your life in your hands with that one. At one point, I thought, right, I really need to go to the loo, and I said to my friend Cam, right, where did you go? She said, well, I just sort of went over to that slab over there because it was less looked upon than some of the others. So I went over to this slab, which quite honestly, it was like, it wasn't very big at all. It was, I'm trying to think what sort of dimensions it was. And it was sloping slightly downwards, and it had a little covering of scree on it. And as I was sitting there contemplating my potential fate if I slipped, I thought, if I slip now, then that is a very long way to fall. And I am not going to be, sort of in a particularly great state at the bottom of it. I thought I really need to be careful because I couldn't handle the embarrassment of falling with my trousers around my ankles. So yeah, it was fortunately your body sort of copes a little bit, shall we say, and you suddenly find that you don't necessarily quite need to go to the loo quite as often as you would normally do. I think the fear had a lot to do with it, and but there's only about get about half a dozen tents or something like that, so it's a constant rotation of people, and all the companies, all the guides all work together to make sure that there's always that everybody knows everybody's summit plans. So so you then sort of just sort of like hot tent almost. So the route down actually is pretty much right down the front.
Charlie,
sorry?
Are those tents permanently there?
No, they're taken down after the season they're taken down.
But I mean, were you carrying them up, or were they
already? Oh no, sorry, no, they were already pitched up there.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't do trips where I've got to carry my own. Oh no, I was going to say I don't do trips where I carry my own stuff, but I did do a trip where I was carrying my own stuff, the Greenland one. But generally, I don't.
Whether those tents get used by everyone that stays there.
Yeah, those ones, the ones at Camp 2 were pretty much. So I don't think they were our tents as such. I think it was just, they were tents, we maybe had one or two tents up there and others would have put up one or two tents.
Okay.
And it's just, everybody just uses everyone else's stuff because you can't put them up and take them down.
Yeah.
So the route down, because obviously you've got to get down there to get back onto the ridge, is pretty much down the front of that. Yet again on fixed ropes, but you're doing it in the dark. So it makes it a bit better because you can't actually see what you're going into. So this is where most summit attempts start from. So we got there, I think, at about, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that. And the idea was we would then get into the tents, sleep until about midnight, get up, get something to eat, and then head off. Unfortunately, there was a group of Russians that had summited that morning that had come back, and I don't know what the problem with them was. They were anyway, but they were partying, So none of us got any sleep at all, and we were all quite glad to actually get a chance to get out the tent, because it was just, yeah, it's just ridiculous. So for summit night, so we got up and we got out about 1 o'clock in the morning or thereabouts, so obviously pitch black. And the first challenge is the Grey Tower, and it's basically about 100 meters worth of vertical rock climbing, and it's, you know, in the dark. The temperatures, actually, I found it was a bit weird, because I had on my my salopettes, and I had on my big expedition jacket, because obviously, you know, you think, well, it's going to be really cold. And I ended up, I had to, halfway up the Grey Tower, or, you know, sort of a bit further up, I ended up having to stop on a ledge and actually take my expedition jacket off. So I ended up, I was climbing in my base layer, because I was just so warm. But I think that's possibly an age thing, and because the others didn't seem to feel this sort of problem. So yeah, so I was climbing up there in my base layer. The rest of it is just an absolute blur. I mean, you get to the top of the rock, and then it's just ice and snow, and it just feels like it's going up. You know, it's just vertical. It just feels vertical all the time. There doesn't feel to be any respite at all. And anyway, these mushrooms that I had worried so much about, I ended up, as we got towards Camp 3, I thought, oh, right, okay, you can see, you know, Camp 3 there. And it was then that I realised that I'd actually just crossed the mushrooms, and there was absolutely nothing to worry about whatsoever. The route was actually, you know, plenty wide enough. The drop-offs weren't that bad. And yeah, I didn't even notice that I'd done it. So all that worrying was for absolutely nothing at all. So
excellent.
So we got to.
How were you going for air at the time? You know, how was your breathing?
Hard. It was. I didn't really acclimatise that well. I've had a couple of stints of not really acclimatising particularly well, and I was finding it really hard work.
Did they provide any oxygen, or was it not on?
Say again? Did
they provide any oxygen?
No, you don't take oxygen below 8,000 meters.
Yeah.
So no, you're just under your own steam, and it's just everything just feels just like hard, you know, so much harder. That's the thing. You know, you just feel out of breath all the time. Your heart rate is going a lot higher than it usually is. I mean, when I was on Cho'oyu, the advanced base camp there was almost the height of Kilimanjaro. Actually, it was about 5'8" or thereabouts, and my heart rate the full 6 weeks that we were at that base camp, it didn't go below 100, and usually my heart rate is, I don't know, 50 or 60. So do
you take any drugs or anything to
help
blood?
No, not if I can help it. I did end up going on Diamox for Cho'oyu, but I try not to, because one of the problems with Diamox is it's a diuretic, so you've got to drink a huge amount, and I struggle with drinking enough anyway, and it basically just goes right through you as well. So although it has got benefits, yeah, I prefer to try and not bother using it if I can. So. But you can see why we made the summit bid from Camp 2, because you can see the tent there, just poking above the rise there at Camp 3, and the Dablam just sits right on top of that. So if anything were to break away, then you can say goodbye in Camp 3, because that would be gone, and it's happened before. So although people do use it, but
don't the Seracs tend to break to the left though?
Yeah, but not always. So it's a matter of weighing up the risks. I mean, if it's a risk that you're willing to take, then, you know, as you can see, there's a couple of tents were there. Most of the expeditions went from Camp 2. In actual fact, I met a Swiss guy. He was like a machine. He actually summited from Camp 1. Which was, and he was back in good time as well. He was incredibly fit. So yeah, so that was got up to Camp 3, and that's the first time that you actually see a bit of flat ground since leaving base camp almost. And so there, pushed on from there because I had a bit of a breather there. My friend Cam at this time, she wasn't very well. She had a bad throat infection, and so she was really struggling. And we were just climbing slowly together. By the time we got to Camp 3, it was probably about, I don't know, 7:30, 8:45 in the morning, something like that. The Swedish guys, I thought, were quite a bit further ahead, but as it happened, they weren't that much further ahead than we were. But we were just taking our time and just plodding on. So biggest challenge, and I've already sort of spoiled it for you, but the biggest challenge was deciding to turn back. Cam was she was finding it more and more difficult to breathe. I was feeling really, really knackered. And I said to the Sherpa that was with us, because, it's not, if you look at that, I mean, the summit is just up at the top of that picture, basically. I mean, I know it's foreshortened and everything like that, but it, relatively speaking, we'd done all the hard bits. And so I said to him, how much longer do you reckon, it'll take to get to the summit? And he said, maybe about 4 hours or thereabout. And I looked, and Cam said, she said, I'm going back. I need to go back. And I thought, right, I'd quite like to push on a bit further. And anyway, I thought, right, okay, well, let's just push on. And then I thought about it a little bit more, and I started calculating and thinking, well, I'm not getting any faster. I'm just going to get slower. So his 4 hours will probably be longer. And I thought, well, the way I feel, I probably get enough to get to the summit. I could probably get to the summit, but I don't think I've got enough to get back. And it was that sort of decision making that I thought, I think this is the right decision, is to turn back. So X marks the spot. That's how high I got. So it wasn't too bad. As I said, all the tricky bits were actually done. It was just a slow slog up that snow face, basically.
Go home, protect the NHS, save
yeah, pretty much. So I turned around. I managed to abseil into that crevasse you can see just below it as well. And but anyway, it was fine. It was fine. And we headed back down. And actually, although I wasn't actually that disappointed, to be perfectly honest, because I knew that I did as much as I could. I did the best that I could. It isn't, the summit is a nice thing to have. But it was it's a mountain that I absolutely loved climbing. It's been my favourite so far. It really has. There's just so much to it, and so
fabulous weather as well.
Say again?
Fabulous weather as well.
Yeah, we were very lucky with the weather, actually. It could have been a lot worse. So the decision to turn round, I wasn't disappointed with that at all. I don't really think I could have pushed myself harder and got to the summit, but as I said, once I'd got to the summit, I would have really struggled getting back down again. And it took Cam and I until about mid to late afternoon to get back down to Camp 2, by which time she could barely breathe. So one of the Sherpas actually frog marched her all the way back down to base camp.
How were you at that time?
Say again?
How were you when you got back to Camp 2?
Just knackered. I could breathe okay. I mean, obviously out of breath with the altitude, but I was just really, really tired. It really did take it out of me, because it's, it is quite energetic climbing.
Did you feel you had much left in the tank?
No, definitely not.
Then you made the right decision.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, there was no doubt about it in my mind, really. We got back, as I said, about mid to late afternoon. Matthias, one of the Swedes, he did a sterling job, actually. He was back not that long after us, actually. He summited okay. And then Stefan, the other Swede, who was going quite a bit slower than Matthias. I mean, it was dark by the time Stefan got back, and I was slower than Stefan. So I'd have been coming down that in the pitch black, which is not really ideal either. No. So yeah, no, it's definitely the right decision, and I've never had any doubt about that. You know, because I thought, well, maybe when I get back, I'll think, oh well, if I'd just pushed on a bit harder, then well, maybe I should have done that. I know that was the right thing to do. So you can see there on the top left, that's us then doing the old arm wrap down down from Camp 3. And it is quite steep. Even the not steep bits are quite steep. Obviously, the other thing is as well that you try to abseil as little as possible, because when you abseil, you can only abseil one at a time, obviously, because as soon as you get weight in the rope, then whoever else is on it, it just stops. So you try to arm wrap as much as possible, because then you can get a few people on at the same time. So it is quite tricky, and there's so many ropes there. I mean, they put up a new rope every year or every season, and they do try to clear away the old ropes, but they can't always do that. So you've got to be so careful that you do actually clip into the right rope. And sometimes it's not that straightforward to actually see which one the right one is. But you can see that the bottom left, that's the ridge going back down towards Camp 1. You can't really, I can't use a pointer on this, unfortunately. I could show you, if you see where the lightest bit on the ridge is, and then you've got the little pointy bit, just yeah, that's where Camp 1 is. But you're basically going either on the ridge or just below it, and you're on the fixed ropes. So sometimes on the fixed ropes, you get to a bit where you've got to swap over clips in the most inconvenient place at times, where you're sort of hanging on by one arm and then trying to sort of clip with the others. And but it was just absolutely, it was phenomenal. And I was so glad that I didn't actually feel worried about the height or the exposure. A week after we did our summit bids, there was an Australian guy, unfortunately, on the Grey Tower, which you get a lot of rock fall on the Grey Tower. I was when I was climbing up, I was sort of bringing up the rear on that, and I kept feeling stuff, sort of getting, chucked down onto me, sort of, so my helmet, there's always there's little stones and whatever else come down, and I was getting quite grumpy because I was thinking of, I wish they could actually just climb cleanly rather than sort of kicking down all this stuff, but rockfall is a problem apparently, and this Australian was on the fixed line when there was a rockfall that severed the fixed line, and so he fell and died. So it sort of, yet again, when you hear things like that, it sort of brings it home to you a little bit that whilst it all feels very, sort of, well, I'm in a fixed line, so it'll all be fine. It's no guarantee. The cake down at the bottom there, I have no idea how they do that on basically camping stoves. They're absolute stars for, I mean, the food was fantastic. It's the best food that I've had at any base camp. It was really, really great. Unfortunately, of course, your appetite goes at altitude, so it's really hard to see all this lovely food and you think, I would so much like to eat that at the moment, but I really can't face it. So, but they did as a cake anyway, so that was good. So basically, my takeaways from this was that the base trail itself is really, really busy October, November time. If anyone was thinking of doing the base trail trek, I would definitely recommend doing it round about December instead, so right at the end of the trekking season, because when I did the Everest Marathon, it was beginning of December and it was really quiet. The ice fall is well worth seeing, however, it is impressive. I'd try and sort of go into another peak and acclimatise instead next time. The climbing was absolutely astounding, and the exposure, I actually really enjoyed the exposure because it was just so exciting. It really was. And I do get vertigo at indoor climbing walls, so down at Calshot or whatever, I find that I don't like to look down at the ground from the top of the wall. And I think this is, for any expedition, it really isn't about the summit. The most important thing is that you actually get back in one piece. There's no point in just throwing it all away just because, I must get to that summit. Perhaps I've just not got the drive that some people have, but I would much rather just, get back and I'll go and try it another time. And so basically I want to go and try it again sometime and see if I can get to the summit. Right.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Great.
What's the light on? What's the time? Do you want me to do the to do the Greenland one?
Yeah.
Or shall I save that for another night? Are you happy to stay on?
Oh, happy to stay on if you want.
Right. Okay. Right. Let me just put the light on.
I'm getting a bit hungry.
We'll go and cook your dinner then.
Yeah.
Right.
You're not going out from talking.
How you doing, John? All right?
Or do you want to do any quick questions on that before we...
Oh,
Yeah. Any questions? Then I can set this up while you're asking questions.
You probably asked stuff as we went along, really, haven't they? So.
Yeah.
I've got a question. Was it all was everyone climbing the peak on a commercial expedition, or were there any people doing it doing it on their own? Because I can imagine like Camp 2, it must be a bit difficult if it's all the tents are all managed by the commercial expeditions.
Most of them were commercial. There were a couple of folk. There was a couple of folk that were doing it. Again, they've still got guides though. So that's still, although it might not be a sort of commercial expedition, you still got a guide as well. So because that's where I actually met the chap who did the 14 8,000 meter peaks, NIMS. He was on there. That's where I met him. So at that point, he was just talking about, his plans for this is what I'm thinking of doing. And so it was really, really interesting, no matter what your views are of how he did it. It was really interesting to then see him actually do it, having heard all about it when we were sitting in his tent having a cup of tea. So
you were actually going up, not with a guide, but with a Sherpa, were you? Is that the way it works?
Well, yeah, I mean, we did it as a, so I'm just trying to find the right thing here. We're doing it as a commercial expedition. So we had I think we had one Sherpa between 2 or 3, something like that. So we had a guy that was with us and looking after us. Rolf was further ahead with Stefan, I think. And there was another Sherpa who was ahead with Matthias because he was going quite well at the time.
All right, yeah. So I guess it makes sense if you've got your guide ahead of you, you can sweep you up on the way back if need be, I guess. So
yeah, well, that's it.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. Right, I'm just trying to get Zoom to... Oh, there we go. My Zoom had just had minimized.
Yeah.
Right, so is everybody ready? And I'll go on to the Greenland one then.
Yeah.
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 Yep.
Wow.
It'll look very similar in some respects because I just kept the same format. So Greenland, this was actually 2017 that I went, and I went with Jagged Globe. And you don't see that many expeditions, not commercial expeditions to Greenland. So I thought, yeah, this looks really good. And it's somewhere that I fancied doing something that was a bit more remote. And it was also ostensibly a trip to do first ascents because there's so many unclimbed peaks in Greenland.
Oh,
so that really appealed to me because I thought, well, it's a little bit different to what I've done before. So basically, this is the area that we're in, and this gives a bit of a scale actually of just how big Greenland actually is. Now, my map that I've got is 1 to 250,000, and that's that area down there, the Tasselak-Kulusuk area. And then you see the rest of Greenland and just how much more of Greenland there actually is. We were in the tiniest little portion of it. It's just the scale of it is just unbelievable. So once you get to Reykjavik, then you fly out to Kulasuk, and yet again it's one of these tiny little turboprop planes, and you the expedition leader, Alan, was very kind. He made sure that we all got seats on the right hand side of the plane, so that when we came in we'd be able to see the icebergs and we'd be able to see Kulasuk and everything. My seat was the only one without a bloody window. And so I passed my phone down the plane a bit and got somebody else to take the pictures for me. But it's a really nice flight in, and then the Kulasuk airport is basically just a little building, and then from there you collect up all your stuff. They arranged for transport down into the village for the big bags, or sort of main bags. When I say big bags, they're not actually that big because you're very limited as to the weights of the stuff you can take over on the plane. So it's a lovely walk down there. There's you see quite a lot of huskies. The adult ones are all chained up because they are working dogs, and you don't approach them at all because they are not used to people. And the puppies, however, just meander around the town, and they're ever so sweet. And you can approach them once they reach about 6 months to a year old. Then you don't go near them at all. You also go past the graveyard as well, which is the one in the bottom left there, and yeah, that was quite interesting as well, because obviously it's they're a bit tight for space really with regards to their graveyard, and then Kulasuk itself was pretty much as you'd imagine, a sort of a Greenlandish town, lots of colourful houses and such like, and it was really nice. The chap who was the Greenland agent, who was organising things from there, was a chap called Matt, he's lived in Greenland. Him and his wife, well, he's been there for about 20 odd years, and him and his wife, they live there in the summer, and they both guide, and then they go to the Alps skiing for the ski season in the winter, because I think even for him who's lived there for a long time, I think the idea of spending winter there would just be a bit too much. So it was August that we did this, so it was it was right in the height of the summer, so we had the 24-hour daylight. So this trip was actually it was like a halfway house between a fully commercial expedition, which obviously it was, but you were expected to sort yourself out as a group. And we were given all the stuff, but we had to sort it out and sort out what all the meals were, and basically we had a bag for everybody. There was 10 clients and 2 guides, and so we each had a big bag, and this would be our food for the next, I don't know, 10 days or whatever it was, 2 weeks that we would be on away on the glacier. And so we've got sort of all the snacks, and then all the sort of the dehydrated food. And trying to sort of pick and mix a bit so nobody's getting landed with all the rubbish stuff. And Maria in the middle there is making up the big bag of trail mix as well. So we did all that, and then got ourselves sorted. Initially, we had thought we were going to be able to take our bigger bags with us as well. And it was sort of dropped on us at the very last moment that no, you'd have to just take your rucksack. And so there was some frantic repacking and a lot of stuff. I mean, when I packed from sort of to go out there in the first place, I had all the stuff on the spare bed as normal, and right, I need this and I'll have that, and the next thing, and I thought, right, now I'll start taking away the things that I don't really need. And I got it down to whatever I got it to, and then when we got there, and they said, right, okay, you can only take what you can get in your rucksack. And it was a case of, right, clearly I didn't actually need all that stuff that I packed, because it all went into the big bag and that got left there. And yeah, we just really had to pare down a lot and just make sure we had the essentials. So it was a real lesson in knowing what the minimum is that you do need to take for one of these, and it's always a lot less than you think you need. So the first stop was, and I'm going to absolutely murder the name of this place. It's not actually pronounced Apusiak, but I don't know how to pronounce it, so that's how I'm going to pronounce it. And we went to this island, and the whole idea of this really was to, because we were 10 people who had never, we didn't know each other. There was a few that had been on trips before together, but we didn't know, sort of what each other were like. It was really to try and get the skills sorted out. And so the other thing was we started doing the bear watch, because although it's a bit far south really for polar bears, and I must admit, I did think to myself, I think they're just doing this as a, sort of make it a bit more exciting, and we better watch out for polar bears. But anyway, so we started the polar bear watch, and we'd do an hour a night, and it would, your watch would move through the night. So there was always 2 people that would have a night off, and then it would go around the next night. So you'd start at, midnight, and then your next night you'd be doing it at 1, and it would go through, and then you'd eventually get a night off. So this is where we were going anyway. We were going by boat up through the channels there. So that was going to be quite exciting as well. So off we went, and it was cold. It was very cold. There are icebergs in that water. And of course you're not shielded at all. So yeah, I had a lot of layers on, and it was still cold. But anyway, we got to the island, and we had our first camp, and we got ditched off basically at a pile of rocks, and we had to cart all the stuff over. So we had to pull the tents across. So we had pulks as well. As it happened, the pulks didn't actually get any more use other than just storage for things. We've got ice there in the pulks to melt down for our dehydrated meals, and but it was lovely, a really nice place. In Greenland, the mountains are not high at all, but obviously most of them you're doing from almost sea level. But yeah, they're really stunning anyway. So as I said, we had a couple of days to try and just get our skills back up to scratch. So doing things like crevasse rescue and all that sort of thing, because that's the sort of thing that if you practice it, then it's you get into the swing of it. But if you're not doing it all the time, it's so easy just to get rusty at it. So we went out and we're doing sort of glacier walking and all this sort of thing, and roping up and such like. So it was really good actually. And then it gave you a good idea actually of who was best suited on what rope as well. We tended to go as ropes of 3 most of the time, and yeah, so we all sort of settled into the sort of groups that we worked best in. So we're then heading off further up, and this is where the main expedition was taking place. So it was there's quite a few glaciers up there that have got very German names, because I think it's basically a crowd of Germans that went in and sort of climbed in there first of all. And the whole idea was to try and find some unclimbed peaks so that we could get some first ascents in. So the Kulisuk is down at the bottom, which is where we started, and then we got the Apusiak Island where we were, and where we travelled up to in the boats was up to where the arrow is there. So it was near sort of Karali Glacier, and we went into a little offshoot of it instead. And we were going to try and do some climbing. So en route, however, we did actually find some wildlife, and this was a real surprise actually. The actual Greenland crew, they were really excited about this. Fortunately, the polar bear was quite safe, because they're only allowed to kill 25 a year, I think, and they'd already done their 25. So this one was safe from the hunters. But I don't know whether it was a male or a female, but my God, it was big. It really was. Shouldn't have been that far south. It really shouldn't have. It was too far south, and I don't know where it was thinking it was swimming to. But we you know, sort of took a couple of pictures and then went on our way. It did sort of focus the mind a little bit that perhaps the bear watch might actually be something that was worthwhile doing. So anyway, so that was a real highlight. We also did see some whales, not to the extent of Steve and Helen, however, who got cracking pictures of them. All I saw was a tail disappearing down below the surface, but there were whales kicking around there as well. So we got up to our area, and so we camped on the beach the first night, and then we were going to head up to the glacier and find somewhere nice to establish a base camp further up. So the beach camp was quite nice, actually. What I should say though is that certainly down at the water's edges and down at the beach, the flies are just absolutely horrendous. We all had mosquito nets. We were told to make sure we had mosquito nets with us, and yeah, it was like Scottish midges. It really was, and they just got everywhere. They just buzzed around the whole time. So although it looks very tranquil, it really wasn't at all, and it was nice to actually leave there and get up onto the glacier. So it was a dry glacier, so for most of it anyway. So we couldn't use the pulks. So we basically had to carry them. And anyway, but it was quite nice. It was about, I don't know, an hour and a half, 2 hours up the glacier. And we found a nice little spot, prodded all around to make sure that it was all quite safe, and then pitched the tents. Unfortunately, as we discovered later on when the sun started to set, this was the first area that went into shadow. So as soon as it went into shadow, the temperature just dropped like a stone. And you could see the other bits, you know, sort of with the sun still shining on. And of course, you couldn't go wandering, because by this time you're actually onto the snowy glacier. So you couldn't actually just go wandering off on your own, because there was a danger of crevasses. In actual fact, we did, most of us at some point fell into a crevasse. They weren't very wide or anything like that. You tend to sort of stop round about thigh level, but there were a lot of crevasses anyway. So we went out and we did quite a few mountains, and so this was the first one that we did, which was nice. It wasn't too difficult. It was, you know, no more than a scramble, and it was a lovely, you know, lovely viewpoint and everything. And you know, could this be a first ascent? Unfortunately not. We found a cairn and found a tin with a group of Italians' names in it, and they'd basically knocked it off in 1969. And yeah, every peak that we went up after that had a cairn at it, so they knocked them all off in that area. So that was a bit of a shame, but it was still, yeah, I mean, you know, it was still lovely anyway, still lovely climbing. So yeah, so we didn't get any first ascents, but it was really good. And you didn't have to climb anything particularly hard. It was just really pleasant. Some of the rock was quite good. Some of the rock was really, really rotten though. And you always had to be very careful that you didn't pull anything down. And that was probably the trickiest bit, actually, was trying to be extremely careful. Because, yeah, I'm quite used to, you know, so I don't climb that much outside, but it's usually quite good rock, and, you know, you can generally pull in things without being too worried that it's going to come off in your hand. It wasn't the case here. I don't know whether it's because of the temperatures and how it, you know, sort of cycles round, but a lot of the stuff you really had to be very careful before you committed to it.
You need to climb more at Swannies to get some practice in.
Yeah, I should go out more outdoors, I must admit. So we did our final peak, and in the right hand picture you can see what some of the rock was like, and yeah, there's a lot of crappy stuff around. That was particularly tricky, and we weren't doing it quite as a move together. We were doing it as a sort of semi-pitch type thing, and but yeah, you had to be so careful about where you're putting your hands and your feet, and of course you've got your mountaineering boots. I didn't have my Spantics for that one, however. I just had my normal alpine boots. But even so, you're still having to be extremely careful about where you're putting your foot and what you're pulling on. But yeah, it was lovely. It was such beautiful weather that we had. We're very lucky actually, because we had a bit of rain when we first got to Kulisuk, and we had a bit of rain pretty much when we got back to Kulisuk. And then the following week after that was going to be absolutely abysmal. And we did actually have a lot of sympathy with the people who just turned up, who were going to be going off and doing mountaineering somewhere on one of the other islands, because it was just going to be horrific. So we then headed back down the glacier to the beach, and this is where we're going to pick up the boat. There was a little Arctic fox, and it was so tame. I don't think it had actually ever seen people, but it was just trotting around the camp. It made off with a block of cheese, and then in the following morning, when we were packing all the stuff, my tent mate, I saw her running full pelt down the beach after this Arctic fox, which had grabbed her bag of trail mix, and yeah, she never got it. So, but it was so fearless, but it was absolutely lovely. We then got our boat trip. We were going back to Apusiak Island. In actual fact, we're going to go around to the back end of that, so that we didn't have too big a journey back to Kulisuk. But yeah, I mean, the icebergs, I mean, they're absolutely fantastic. So big. You know, you could have done some cracking ice climbing on those, except obviously they might just, you know, tip over and that would be the end of you. But yeah, they were just absolutely magnificent. They really were, just floating around minding their own business. So we're going round to the back end of Apusiak Island for our final little stint. So we had one more summit. The weather had turned a little bit by this time, so, but yeah, we got up there and had a lovely climb, and then it was back down to the water again. Got everything packed up, and then waiting for the beach, the boat. Yet again, that looks a very tranquil location there. You know, the person sitting, you know, in the sort of romantic, you know, sort of in the front of the water. Yeah, they are wearing a midge net because yet again, it is just absolutely horrendous for flies. It's the worst bit of it, to be honest. But yeah, you end up having to try and eat, you know, sort of just trying to pull the net up just enough to be able to get a mouthful in, and hope that you don't get any flies come in with it as well. So this is basically what we did with the summits. So we had on Apusiak Island, we had a couple of summits. We had a day out where we weren't summiting anything. We were just playing around, and they were the two base camps. So the first one on the green one, the lower one, so that was where we had our first trip to the island, and then the final one for that final summit is the higher one. And on the actual glacier itself, we made our base camp where the green X is. So we'd walked up the glacier, and the idea originally had been, if we had time, was to carry on round. If you come from where it says where the little red sign is, it says Gletschers Glaciers, and walking down the page there, down towards the base camp. What we had hoped to do was to carry on just going round and then getting back down to the water by the other little glacier that's just to the left of it and above. But we didn't have time, unfortunately, because that would have meant dismantling the camp and then having to spend a day just going off and doing porterage, and we decided we'd rather climb. So the others actually did another peak in there, but there was a few of us stayed back at the camp that day, just as you know, just for a bit of a rest day. And so yeah, so the takeaways from Greenland was, it is a huge place. It really is. I mean, you saw on the map just the tiniest little bit of where we actually went, and it was just the tiniest fraction. Polar bears are really, really big. I mean, I knew they were big. I've seen them in the zoo, but to see one actually in the wild, in real life, was absolutely amazing. And it is really not something you'd want to encounter in the land. And we did tend to focus a bit more on doing our bear watch once we'd seen that. But we tended to be a little bit more lackadaisical on the actual glacier itself, because we were quite a distance, as I said, we were a good couple of hours away from the beach. And it was only once we got back to Kulisuk and we were having, celebratory beers after a good expedition that Matt, the guy that lives in Greenland, he said, polar bears, if they're really keen, if they're really hungry, then they will go right up the glacier. And apparently there was a polar bear that tracked a group for quite a long distance up a glacier. And there's been other people that have encountered them, sort of walked around the corner of a mountain and suddenly been faced with it. So we could quite easily have seen one.
Don't become a polar bear takeaway.
Say again? Yeah, well, exactly, yeah. Oh, yeah. There really is, there's so much more of Greenland to explore. It's, the more remote you go, the more chances are of finding unclimbed mountains. And it's just absolutely superb. I mean, we weren't really sort of quite what I'd call on the mainland either, really. We were still off of that. And once you get in there a bit, then sort of there's areas that people have just probably never been to at all. So lots of opportunities if the Italians haven't got there before you for first ascents. Could it be a Wessex future big expedition? The one thing I would say is that the thing that I found the trickiest was actually getting insurance to cover Greenland. The Austrian Alpine Club doesn't cover it, and the way I did it was I joined the Dutch Mountaineering Club, NKBV, and they, as part of their, you could buy insurance, and they covered everywhere, and they covered any altitude, and I did it through them. But unfortunately, they've since had to stop offering insurance to non-Dutch nationals. So I haven't been able to do that anymore. But that was the biggest headache, was trying to work out how to get insurance at a reasonable price. So that's Greenland.
Hey.
So what was the BMC insurance just going to be too expensive then? The sort of.
I didn't even bother looking at BMC, to be honest, because when I did Cho'oyu, for that trip, it cost me 700 quid just for the insurance, and that was just for that one trip.
Wow.
Yeah.
But I did a trip out to Greenland a long time ago, must be at least, I'm about to say 15 years ago, probably longer than that. I think that we've got BMC insurance then. But
So how long were you total on Greenland then?
That was, I think it was about 18 days, the trip in total.
Okay.
Well, it wasn't too long.
How long was the Dablam trip?
That was 28 days, I think, or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, it was about a month. So, but of course, in Greenland, you don't need to worry about altitude, which is a bit of an advantage.
Oh, yes.
yeah, you mentioned midges. Are they really midges? Because the trip I remember doing, what was biting us were a lot bigger than midges. They're more like mosquito-sized things.
Yeah, they are big, but they're just as irritating as the midges. Yeah.
Well, they were not little dots. They were like, yeah.
Oh no, they're big. Yeah, they are big.
Yeah.
Horrible
Yeah,
things.
our trip we did like a 10-day trip. And the idea, it was kind of planned a bit of a recce, really. And I don't think anyone suggested going back.
Yeah.
But we were camping on the coast, and it was
yeah. Once we got up onto the glacier, then it was fine. Actually, it wasn't bad at all.
I remember getting away from our base camp. It was just like, oh, you can sit here without a mosquito net on.
Yeah. No, just get miserable.
Yeah. I know a few people have done sort of some of the peaks on the ice cap. Most of them have flown onto the ice. But
Yeah.
Where you could actually get up from the sea level then.
Yeah. It was really good, actually. I mean, for me, obviously, it's the first time I've been there, so it was a nice introduction to it. And it was also good, you know, I mean, I know obviously, you know, most folk in the club are used to, you know, going off and doing expeditions that aren't commercial, but it was a nice halfway house for me to still know that, you know, things were being taken care of, but also that we were, you know, basically being allowed to be self-sufficient and sorting ourselves out, and just having that ability to be able to do that. Then it was quite a nice combination, really.
What was your longest walk-ins?
I think the most we did in a day was probably about, I don't know, maybe about 8 miles or something like that total. Okay. So the walk-ins weren't particularly, they weren't that long. I mean, we're doing like 7 and 8 hour days, because obviously a lot of that was taken up with climbing, and it was relatively slow because we were roped up and doing 3 to a rope. And then depending on what sort of climbing we were doing, then sometimes you could move together. Sometimes you were someone was going on ahead and then waiting and then bringing up the other people. So, but yeah, no, it was quite a variety of climbing as well. And we did one which was it was a little satellite peak actually. It wasn't very big at all, but it was a really enjoyable one, because you were sort of climbing up and, you know, sort of getting to the top, nice views round, and then there's quite a bit of down climbing as well, which was enough to be, you know, sort of stretching you, but not so much that you were, you know, sort of quaking in terror or anything like that. So yeah, no, it was nice. They'd stipulated a sort of an ability level of being able to do like a PD plus or maybe a little bit more. So the technical difficulty wasn't that difficult. The hardest bit was the fact that that so much of the rock was just loose, and you try not to kick it down on the person that's in front of you or behind you, depending on whether you're going up or down. So,
what was the temperature on the glacier?
In the sun, it was base layer weather, possibly even, you know, sort of a bit of t-shirt weather. As soon as the sun went, well, the sun didn't go down as such. It basically just dipped down a bit and went behind the mountains that we were sort of base camp was pitched in. And as I said, our base camp, you know, you could see that was the first thing that got the shadow. And as soon as you went into shadow, the temperature just plummeted big time. So I don't know what it got down to. It wasn't horrendously bad. It was probably about -5, -10 at the most. So it wasn't too bad. I wouldn't have wanted to go into the water, however. I put my hand in and that was enough.
30 seconds before your finger drops off. That's what we found.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wasn't too bad for time either. It was a wee bit longer than I thought, but
Brilliant. That was brilliant.
Anywhere else to go?
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's
what
about twice what you told me.
I know. Well, you kept asking questions. That was the thing.